In the 1960s, Barry was a port of international importance, the world's biggest exporter of coal. But things have changed since then. In the pigeon industry, there have also been great changes. In the UK, it was traditionally widowwood racing which was most prominent. But over the years, the skill of young bird racing has increased dramatically. So much so that certain fanciers specialise in just that. The partnership of Spence and Nichols has a remarkable success rate. This video will investigate the methods which built up the reputation of this loft to one of the most outstanding in the UK. In 1992, a young hen accrued the name of Heartbreaker, one of the best birds the loft had ever seen. She failed time and time again to achieve the results expected of her. From this point on, the management system was refined and developed, so that 1993 became a new chapter in young bird racing. The result of the first race speaks for itself.
Right, well then, Tom, this is the stock loft. We'll get inside and have a look at this other equipment.
Yeah, Derek, thank you for your invitation this morning to discuss your unique method of young bird racing. Yesteryear, of course, it was always considered of secondary importance, but of course for the last few years, with the advent of cars, prizes, futurity races, ring schemes, the skill has to increase to be successful. Your stock loft, I know, is famous for its number of open winners, federation winners and what have you, and with the medium that good old birds will breed good young pigeons, you certainly have the material.
Oh yeah, the competition in the Welsh North Road Fed, by its face size, is very stiff, and the more the competition, the more we like it. Having said that, we race against 20,000 pigeons every week. You can't win every week in that competition. The federation is divided into 6 separate federations of about, on the normal races, 3,000 birds each, and all the fanciers within that competition amongst themselves have a result, and then all those 6 races go together to get the massive open results of the Welsh North Road Fed with up to 25,000 pigeons. So it's no good getting too carried away with the massive birdages, because no one's in competition because of the size of it every week, really.
But you have winners of open competition here.
Oh, certainly. There are several winners in open competition here, which we'll have a look at one or two now. This fella here is typical of the Van den Bosch strain, and the archetypal Van den Bosch cock, a pencil pied. You'll see these many places for sale. Many people got them. What's the rarity, and what we're interested in today, is this fella has beaten over 20,000 pigeons in races. This is the famous Bib 3. As a young bird, this pigeon won a race of over 20,000 pigeons, amongst others which we'll come to later. But what we're talking about at the moment is stock birds and breeding your race team of next year and the year after.
You have more of these pigeons, Derek, open winners?
Certainly. Let's go to the nest box next door. We don't have to look too far to find a not dissimilar pigeon, the pencil-pied cock lionheart. First open, 21,000 pigeons as a young bird. I've found over the last 20 years that to find good stock birds, you don't have to look any further than your good race birds, because the good race birds always breed good race birds. Now, I don't know whether it's peculiar to this family of pigeons, but every good pigeon we've had has bred winners, without exception.
Right. Derek, a couple more pigeons you have there, open winners?
Certainly, we've discussed a couple of young bird winners there. I don't want people to think that these pigeons only win as young birds. This is a pigeon called Middle. Won many prizes as an old bird, including first open Welsh North Road Federation Carlisle, 240 miles, 12,000 pigeons in competition. from the foothills of Scotland as a 2-year-old. These pigeons will do it up to the middle distance of about 350, no problem. Old birds or young birds, what makes the difference is the management.
I understand your stock pigeons are not prisoners. They're the successful racers of yesteryear, which you've now put into the stock loft, and they have their freedom, of course, every day.
The joy of keeping pigeons is watching them run around the garden. The race lofts, we don't let pigeons do that on the widowed old bird system, or particularly the young bird system. The regime is far too strict. So when they come to stock, when they're retired, is when they enjoy their life. They're here, they're in the garden, we'll see them a little bit later walking around, and that's what it's all about. It's so easy to break good pigeons in from a race loft to a stock loft. There's no need to keep them locked up.
We all know that today many fanciers buy pigeons on paper. You reverted to the old maxim of retired successful racing pigeons being put to stock, which in my view is would form a better basis for breeding successful young pigeons, for racing of course.
When you've been successful for a number of years, as we've been lucky to be, you soon accumulate race birds which are not raced anymore. These are the ideal stock birds, without exception. Well, let's say 9 out of 10 of these pigeons have been raced. All these birds, they've all been raced and have been retired to stock. So this is the stock loft, which is only 2 miles from the race loft.
Yeah, okay, I think we've seen enough of your pigeons. I think it's about time we got down to the young bird racing, Derek. Having seen the solid foundation of your very ultra-successful stock pigeons and the race winners therein, when did the season start?
Well, I would say that any season, yearly season for a pigeon fancier starts in October. The reason for that being that the racing has then come to an end and any breeding has then come to an end, and it's an opportune moment for a blank piece of paper to be drawn on and to start anew from there. And the first thing you must do is ensure that those team of pigeons are healthy to start the new season. And obviously the only real way to know that the pigeons are healthy is to get professional help. I use a vet, name of Frank Harper and his wife Sandra, very professional people. In October I ask them to visit each year, and they'll come along with their microscopes and their various bits and bobs and do a health check on all the pigeons I own. And at that time, if they find anything wrong, there may be coccidiosis, trichomoniasis, anything at all, whatever they find that's wrong, if they prescribe any antibiotics or drugs, I will use them. If they don't, I won't, and that goes for the entire season. The biggest waste of money is blind treating your birds at a guess that they might have something wrong with them and buy a treatment to treat that, when professional help, not too many years ago, was out of the reach of most people. But today, professionals are there, not so much vets, but laboratory testing staff who can take pigeon drop-ins and test them for anybody. Yes, so through November, any treatment that you do may last through November, but obviously the pigeons are molting through, they're resting, they're mainly locked up. If you want to fly young birds successfully in today's competition, there's no two ways about it, there's no ifs and buts. You must breed your pigeons as early as possible. Now, the way the rings are issued in all unions in the UK, you can't get young bird rings until the 10th of January, so we can't pair our birds up before the 5th or 6th of December in any year, because obviously the youngsters that you hatch will be too old to get the young bird rings on them.
How would you manage to get these pigeons into mating condition?
Obviously, as we've seen at the footage of the stock lofts, they're fully fitted out with artificial light and heat, a full central heating system and lighting which is on in the winter 15 hours a day. What we're trying to do is make the environment in December as much like June as we possibly can. So the lights go on at 6 in the morning and don't go off until 10 in the night. And the heat is kept at a constant 55-60 degrees with a thermostat. This is fooling the pigeons into thinking that it's time to breed. And it works. It's worked for several years now. With your stock birds, those that don't want to lay early in December, you soon find out, because every year they're not producing eggs. So if you just, by a process of elimination, discount them from your stock team and only leave pigeons in there which do lay early in December, you'll soon, over a couple of years, amass a team of pigeons which are used to breeding in the winter. We've seen at my house today that there's quite a large number of stock birds, up to 80 pigeons, which, why we keep that many pigeons is to race this system successfully for young birds. All the young bird race team must be hatched at the same time. They must all be first round. It's no good having little bits added on and that. At the 14th of February, which we'll talk to later, there's a stop date. So all the birds must be hatched in one round. So if you want to race, let's say a team of 20 youngsters on this system, Tom, you must have 30 stock birds. If you want to race 60 youngsters like we do, you must have a team of 80 stock birds.
And of course, first week of January, Vaseline comes very much into play.
Oh yeah, we can sometimes be caught with pigeons which are 7, 8, 9, 10 days old, which is a struggle to get the rings on. But you know, you can ring most pigeons up to 12 days old with a struggle, bit of Vaseline and that. We've now reached a stage where the youngsters are about due to get weaned, which could be anything the end of January. And they're weaned off, they're brought from the stock loft to the race loft, which is obviously behind us here. Now, some of your stock birds wouldn't have laid on time. They'd be a couple of days late than that. So I do like to give a bit of leeway and say, on the 14th of February each year, the young bird loft is shut. Any youngsters which are not weaned by then do not come into the young bird team. No matter how they're bred or what's happened, there's a stop. It's imperative. The 14th of February, no more birds in. We've got a standing order with the vet again, Frank Harper, to come along and then re-examine the birds again. He'll come along and all the birds are weaned over, they're all up and running and eating themselves and drinking themselves. So he'll do a health check, which should last a whole season for these young birds.
How do you feed?
Well, the food is, the food they're reared on by the stock birds is 90% maple peas. So when we wean them, they're weaned on 100% maple peas. They're obviously easier for the babies to eat, nice and small and round. They're very high in protein. And that's all they need to eat because they're still growing. You've weaned them at 27, 28 days old. They're still growing. The best growing medium is maple peas, so they're kept on that for the next 4 weeks of their life. They've been on it for the first 4 weeks, and they'll be kept on that here for the next 4 weeks.
Perhaps the worst month of the year, February weather-wise. These pigeons are let out every day, of course, and they fly every day.
No. At this time, for the first fortnight at least of their lives, they're locked up. Here, they can see out. There's big open spaces on this loft, as we'll have a look at in a minute. There's full wire, they can see out. They don't need to be out to know where they are. So they're just kept locked away in the back of a night time and when the weather's bad, and just out when it's pleasant, as it sometimes is in February, to look around. This will do two things. They're looking out to see where they live, basically, because they weren't bred here, they were bred 2 miles away. And secondly, when they're locked in the back, this 100% protein diet and being locked up encourages them to molt, and they will molt heavily and quickly. All the body. The wing molt, they'll be hard pushed to molt one feather and stop. Body molt, the body molt is completely gone through, and all the pigeons are fully body molted by the end of February. They drop one flight, stop molting, carry on with the body molt, have a full wing, and stay like that for weeks and weeks and weeks, and right up until when they're racing, 5 months later. The system which has been bandied about of recent times, the darkening system, the lighting system, all various systems to keep youngsters from stop molting. So, or to keep youngsters from molting, should I say. It's a fallacy. Why people are going to the trouble of doing these things and treating young pigeons like they were veal calves, or even worse in some instances, giving them all sorts of horrible substances, keeping them locked in the dark, there's no need. If you don't want your pigeons to molt, breed them before Christmas and they won't molt.
St David's Day, March the 1st, youngsters now are body moulted. What's happening in the young bird loft?
By this time, weather's getting a little bit better. The youngsters which have not been out much, in fact not at all, we start to let the birds out. We just open the main door and let the birds come out, and they'll just walk around the garden, and I'll feed them back in through the main door, and we'll feed them in the same place that they're always fed. And at this time we're just coming to the end of feeding maple peas, and we're introducing the wizard mix, which is the mix which is made for me, especially to my design, which we feed the youngsters on. They're not flying yet, and they're just walking on the garden. As I've said, we'll give them another fortnight there. We're getting to the middle of March. Now, middle of March, these youngsters, they're big fat things. They haven't flown, they've been walking on the garden. Been fed mainly maple peas, but we're now moving on to the wizard mix, and it's time for them to start doing something. So we'll say the 14th of March has come. Let the youngsters out, as we do. Instead of letting them walk on the garden, that's all over. They must be made to, in no uncertain terms, to know that they've got to leave the garden, and the wings that they've got, which they don't know what they are yet, they've never flown, because they're just like little fat womblers just been walking on the garden. Up they go, scare them off the garden, chuck a football at them, do what you like, but they must be made to fly up. And for the next fortnight, to the end of March, they're just allowed to sit around the loft. If they don't want to fly, if they want to just sit on the loft roof, that's fair enough. We'll just let them do that, because it's still pretty early in the year and they're pretty young. And we'll not encourage them to fly, but they won't be allowed to come down on the garden and pick. And when they come in, they're fed wizard mix by this time, through the trap, into the feeding station, fed.
And of course in April the old bird starts racing, and in its natural way the young birds take a back seat.
Well, at this time, at the beginning of April, we're still the same. They're still getting fed wizard mix as much as they can eat, but now they're forced out through the bottom trapdoor. When they go out, say we've gone from the garden to the loft roof, now it's all over. These pigeons must fly. April has come, so if they come out and they don't want to fly straight off and go and exercise, and they land on a shed roof, they're flagged off. Football, big flag on a stick, whatever you like, but they're made to fly. Now, if they only want to fly for 10 minutes, I won't scare them off again. Once they go off and come back and land, we'll get them straight in, feed them 3/4 ounce of wizard mix, and put them away for the day, or until tea time, if we're talking about a morning flight. Same twice a day, out, fly, hit the roof, fed, in.
So the disciplines are now starting.
From the 1st of April, the discipline's on. Out, in the sky, hit the shed roof, in the shed, food, locked away.
Merry month of May, we're now basket training young pigeons in the basket overnight with a drinker on.
Yes, 1st of May. And what happens in this regime on the 1st of May is that's the time the youngsters need to be trained. By this time, the youngsters should be coming out, straight out, off, fly, maybe gone for an hour if it's a particularly nice day, and they're out ranging out. That's
Twice a day, Derek?
Twice a day. The important thing is they're liberated through the bottom trapdoor, out, flying, gone, return, in, 3/4 ounce, put away. Twice a day. When they're doing that, by the 1st of May, or certainly by the 14th of May at the very, very latest, training baskets out, start to train them up the road. They're still really quite young when they're going in a basket for the first time, and we've found that basket training and actual training combined together, as in the first time they go in a basket is when they go for a toss, works perfectly well.
At what stage do you consider far enough? The first race point?
First toss is 7 miles for a pigeon. No particular reason why, it's just a convenient place on the motorway for us to train the pigeons at 7 miles.
How many times from 7 miles?
I'd like to go 4 or 5 times at 7 miles, then 4 or 5 times at 14 miles, and 4 or 5 times at 20 miles. But at this stage of training, early, I wouldn't want to be rushing off and training the pigeons every day. I still want them to fly. I still want them to exercise around the loft and learn their local geography. So if you toss them every day, they're going to take the steam out of them, they're going to stop flying after 3-4 days. So what I do is for every day that they're tossed, they're let out twice as often. And by that I mean that if I toss them this morning on a Monday morning, Monday night they would be just let round the loft for a fly, and Tuesday morning they'd be just left round the loft for a fly, and on Tuesday night I'd train them again, as in like 1 training toss, 2 flies round the house. From the 1st of June, we're then going to say, right, no more flying around the loft. We have been flying the youngsters around the loft for the last month because they're still learning really where they live, even though it's sort of in their head, they know where they live, but they're just having a good look round. But from the 1st of June, we don't want them to learn any more of where they live. It's all in there, all the geography's done. They've had, I don't know, 15 or 20 tosses up to 20 miles, know exactly what's going on. What we want to do now is teach them to race. And teach them to race from greater distances. So the idea of flying them around the loft is teaching them absolutely nothing. Over the next month, or 3 weeks, throughout June, the birds will be trained every day at increasing distances up to and including, if possible, the liberation site of the first race, which to ourselves here is 73 miles. Now, some people fly 120 miles for their first young bird race. I wouldn't anticipate training that far. But having said that, some people race 40 miles for their first young bird race, and if that was the case, I'd train there every day. Okay. But each to their own, and you've got to use a bit of common sense there. I try to maybe get to the first liberation site for the race once, 74 miles, but certainly 55 miles every day for 10 or 15 days.
And of course July, beautiful weather, heat, you have 60 odd youngsters fully body moulted, sexually active, cocks and hens in together, eggs everywhere no doubt.
Yeah, you're precisely right there. It's the 1st of July, youngsters are fully trained. We've had 15 tosses to 55 or 60 miles, they've been to the first race once. The training is now, you can't teach them anymore, they know where they live. We now come on to motivate the pigeons to win races. As you say, these pigeons are now 7 months old. There's cocks and hens got nests everywhere. There's hens have laid, they're driving the nest, they're doing all sorts. People may think this is the way to have them. Quite the contrary. Now, 1st of July, 3 or 4 weeks before the first race, in most people's language, the birds are separated. Cocks to the one side, hens to the other. All the little nests that they may have made and claimed little boxes, all gone to the wayside. Cocks, hens. Possibly going to sulk for 1 or 2 days. Big deal, don't worry. We now want to decrease the distance on the training. They've been to 50 or 60 miles, they've been to the first race point. You can't teach them anymore. Bring the training back to 20 or 25 miles. So when they get up there, they know it back to front, they could fly it backwards, they're just coming straight home. When they drop in, they're going straight for the trap and straight in. And the motivation we're trying to get in 2 ways. Firstly, they're going to be hungry for just the first 3 races. Now that's not a bad thing. Some people say, oh, you can't stab them. It's not a question of stabbing. They're going to be slightly hungry for the first 3 races, but mainly they're going to be motivated by the sex drive. The hens are quite possibly worse than the cocks, but every toss that they come home, because they're trained separately now, kept separately, trained separately. Hens first, in through the trap, back fed, own quarters. 10 minutes later, cocks up, in through the trap, own quarters. Then for 5 minutes, I've got a little trap door inside, which we'll have a look at later, which allows me to open it up and all the young cocks can see the young hens and they can play up to each other and parade, and possibly once a week I'll let all the birds back together, and these young cocks that were paired to young hens will find each other and run round and have an hell of a time. And we'll work on this motivation for the next 4 weeks, from the 1st of July to maybe the 3rd or 4th week in July, whenever the first young bird race is, usually about the 3rd week in July for most people. And this is the motivation. Same feeding, hit the trap, in the trap, into the central feeding station, 3/4 of an ounce each morning, each night. this is going to change slightly now. We've come to the middle of July. The first young bird race is only a week, possibly 2 weeks away. It's now time to get the pigeons a little bit hungry. Now, when I first started experimenting with the food, I tried an ounce a day for youngsters. It's not enough. They're too hungry. Ounce and a quarter for the first 3 young bird races is ample. They're hungry, but they've got enough food to fly and to win, and to be healthy and fit. I think that the probiotics help them assimilate the food that much better, that maybe that's feeding them as well as the corn. So there may be some more than just an ounce and a quarter a day. But then we'll change the system of feeding in when we're on to an ounce and a quarter a day, twice a day. Birds are trained in the morning, 3/4 an ounce on return. In the night, when they're not trained, just half an ounce. Now, the following morning, if I don't train on the morning because the weather's no good, whatever, they'll have half an ounce in the morning, and if they're training at night, they get 3/4 an ounce. So we'll top load the feeding
After.
with the training. So when they're trained, they get a little bit more food than when they're not trained, just to give them more incentive to get in, hunger to get in, sexual drive to get in, out of the training, out the sky, in there, in. So when the first race comes, because in most people's federations, the first race is something of a trapping match, and you want pigeons to be trapping their heads off. It's easy enough to get them in the first bunch when short distance young bird racing are all together, but what is getting them on the clock.
Eve of the very first young bird race, you feed them or you don't?
On a Friday, they're fed exactly the same as they are every other day, because their bodies and their hunger is at the same level. They're just being fed the same. So Friday morning, I'd train them on a Friday, give them 3/4 an ounce. Friday afternoon, give them half an ounce, and at 3 o'clock, I'd feed on a Friday for obvious reasons, just to get the food into them a little bit earlier for a race basketing. And at 3 o'clock, I'd leave the cocks and hens go together before the race, much as you would with old bird widowers, and let them get on with it.
First race, 2 or 3 hours maybe, Sunday dawns. In the basket again, training?
Yeah, that's right. Certainly for the first 3 weeks. The Saturday race is no more traumatic, really. Bad in the first race was a bit nerve-wracking than a training toss, and it should be treated just as another day, another training toss. Birds come home, birds are all together, birds are separated.
3 races have gone by. Do we still continue the same way?
Well, we can break it down. We've into 3 areas. The first 3 young bird races, they're all sprints. They're all fast and furious. The birds must be kept on an ounce and a quarter of corn for those 3 weeks and trained every day. Now, sometimes you're going to put in phenomenal results. You may have a bad week. It doesn't really matter. Stick with the system no matter what, and they'll win. You know, you might have a bad week this week, a brilliant week the next week. Especially if you're starting off on the system, things come and go. But when you do want to change, it's from race 4. Race 4, from then on, usually your distance has gone up a bit. You don't want to have the pigeons hungry then. Get them back on ounce and a half. They've been hungry for the last 3 weeks. They're so indoctrinated to come straight over and straight in. It don't matter if they're hungry or not anymore. It's in their heads. They're doing it. They've been doing it for, you know, the best part of their life. The racing is not so fierce and fast and so close together anymore, so you can ease off a bit. And what I say, from race 4 to race 7, get them back on ounce and a half. Keep them on the same cock end system. Train them every day except Sunday now. Sunday they deserve a day off. They've had 3 races. They've been hungry for 3 weeks. Get them back on ounce and a half. Race 4 onwards, don't train on a Sunday. And so the corn's gone up to ounce and a half, and we've cut the training out by one toss a week. That's all. But we're still on it, right up until race 7.
By the first week of September, we've now had 7 races. Do you change the system?
You should have several prize winners in your young bird team by this time. The best pigeons, whether it be cock or hen, whether you're racing widowwood next year or roundabout or keeping your young hens for stock or whatever you're doing, but your best pigeons, after 7 races on this regime, stop them. Because if you don't, you're going to start hurting them. 7 weeks racing, training every day, 3 weeks of being hungry, and training for 50 or 60 training tosses before that will start to take its toll. So if you've got high regard for young pigeons in your team after 7 races, stop them, or you will do them irreparable damage. So what I do after 7 races, I go in there and pick out 10 or 12 yearling cocks for next year, put them to one side. They're not trained again, not done anything again, that's them for the year. But in Wales, we've still got another 5 or 6 races to go. So the rest of the team are sent on to the bitter end. What I'll do to get some change, because after 7 races they're getting pretty jaded on this system, it's all pretty old that, so yeah, you come home on Saturday, hens are in there, big deal. I'll leave them all together. Get the pigeons on a nest. And they may take a second wind, they may get a new lease of life. They usually do. Get them onto a nest and only train them four times a week maximum. Feed them as much as they want. Same mix, wizard mix. Feed them as much as they want and leave them together paired up for the last 4 or 5 races.
Still obviously body molted through, but their primary surely are starting to go through.
What happens is all through the heavy training stage and the first couple of races, they're not molting at all. They've got a full wing. They've molted 1 or 2